Episode 31 with Jason Garner.
Where meditation meets daily life, this is the Meditation Freedom Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Meditation Freedom Podcast. My name is Sika Road, and this podcast is all about meditation, mindfulness, why we do it, and how we bring that into our daily lives. How does it express itself into daily life? Today's interview is going to be with Jason Garner. Now, Jason's got a really interesting life story, and we'll be discussing some of that during the interview, but briefly, here's his story up to now. Basically, Jason spent the first 37 years of his life, to use his words, running through life, holding his breath. He was raised by a single mom, moving from house to house, and worked really hard in school, and then became very entrepreneurial, and just worked his way up the ladder of conventionally understood success. And at the peak of that career, he got to be an executive at a Fortune 500 company and CEO of global music at Live Nation, producing over 20,000 concerts a year and hanging out with rock and sports stars. He was also twice named to Fortune magazine's list of the top 20 highest paid executives under 40 years old. As for his personal life, he was married twice, divorced twice, raised two children largely as a single dad, and then a series of events centered around the sudden death of his mother brought, as he says, his life to a halt and my ego to its knees. And at this point, Jason took a step off the endless treadmill of his life and got to know himself better by learning from various teachers. And by studying his health and spirituality and the inner workings of his mind through a meditation practice, amongst others, he, for the first time in his life, really learned to breathe. And Jason now integrates this insight that he learned into his daily life and shares his own treasures in his own unique way. Jason's got a great blog and also published his first book through his writing by sharing himself fully and authentically. His new book is called And I Breathe It, My Journey from a Life of Matter to a Life That Matters. And you can find the links to this book and other links mentioned during this interview by going to meditationfreedom.com/031. And the links will be at the bottom of the page under resources. And of course, you're welcome to leave a comment as well. So let's get right into the interview with Jason Garner. Thank you so much, Jason, for joining me in this podcast and for taking out the time.
No, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. What I usually start my podcast is, my interviews, is by asking the guest how they got to a path of meditation. And I think your friend Bruce Lipton, who wrote the foreword, he kind of talked about the 3 stages of the hero's journey. And that's kind of a nice way, I think, to start is to maybe you could describe a little bit about your drive to the top, I guess, in from a worldly perspective, and from an American dream. For a lot of folks, this is like the American dream, and how you climbed up there, and what your discovery was once you got to the top there.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is. It's kind of the American dream. I was born. And then raised by a single mom. We lived in a trailer in Arizona. My mom worked at a children's home, and we really had no money, and kind of no involvement, or not much involvement from my father. And so there was a real sense of poverty and a real sense of loneliness. And I think what I took from that as a little boy was that if we had more money, everything would be okay.
Right.
And so that was a narrative that grew with me. That there was this pain that I was feeling, there was this pain that my mom was feeling, and that if only I could figure out how to make some money, that would solve that. And so, the story of my childhood through 35 years old, is me starting with washing dishes when I was a kindergartner at the children's home, to selling gum on the schoolyard, to working at a flea market, to starting a concert company, and then all the way up to, when I became the CEO of Global Music at Live Nation. It was this nonstop kind of sprint to get as much money and power as I could, and at the time it was a very subconscious thing. I was just doing what felt right inside, and what, as you said, the American dream tells us that we're supposed to do. And so I reached this place where I had been very successful in my career, and something was missing. It was starting to click within me that I just kept achieving more, but then I kept wanting more and needing more. Mm-hmm. And there was, you could say, like, what more could you want? But I did want more. I needed it. Everything was tied up in this identity of Jason, the achiever. And I was in the middle of my second divorce, and my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer and given 6 months to live. Mm. And my mom, as I said, had not had money, but she had kind of had that same work ethic where, while I was driven to make money, my mom was driven to save the world. And so she really had spent her life just giving and giving and giving of herself. And while the result was different, I saw a lot of similarities as I spent the last few months of her life with her. And I began to realize that I had to make some changes, and that kind of hero's journey moment when you realize that there's maybe a different path, came for me as my mom took her last breaths in my arms, and I just held my mom, and my sister was with me, and we cried, and there was just this realization that there's got to be more than just endlessly seeking, whether that seeking is seeking money or whether that seeking is, seeking affection or seeking saving everybody. There has to be more than just this endless seeking. And so, not too long after that, I exited my job, and I went on a journey, and literally a physical journey and an emotional journey and a spiritual journey. And I've studied with, a lot of just wonderful teachers that I'm so grateful to, including going to the Shaolin Temple in China and studying Zen Buddhism with the monks there, studying with Guru Singh and studying with Bruce Lipton and Sharon Salzberg and Montauk Chia and Ron Teagard and David Wolf. I really wanted to dissect my life and then put back together a life that I thought was more conducive to happiness. And what I've really discovered along the way, to summarize it all, is for me it all comes down to self-love, and that's a hard thing for men to say, and it's a hard thing for men to hear.
Yes.
But I really believe that there's only two options. We're either aware of our need for love, or we have an unloved little boy inside of us subconsciously driving all of our decisions. But either way, we need the love, and either way, we're seeking to find that love, and whether we find that, whether we believe we're finding that in business, or we can stop and be honest with ourselves and figure out ways through our lifestyle to deliver the love to us, we're going, that we are seeking that love and we are in need of that love. And so, for me, here, 5 years, 6 years removed from my mom's death, it's just the realization for me is it all begins and ends with self-love. And I think that, I've tried to build a life that fosters that self-love, and then created some platforms to share that with others.
Right. And just to get back a little bit about how the initially the journey, our society and everything and our conditioning and programming basically pushes us armoring ourselves up and with defenses and the workaholic and the masks and the titles and so in a way it makes it much worse initially if we follow the program that says, you're not good enough unless you have X, Y, Z, and accomplish this and that. And so in a way, you keep getting more separate until you get to that point where you decide you want to open your heart. It's interesting to me how in society it's pushing us a little bit towards more separation rather than less separation. And so we have to kind of go against the stream.
I think that's right. I think the whole American dream culture is set up that we are separate and that and that we are in competition, mm-hmm. and that we are only loved when we do something, and when we do something usually is tied to something that's good for the system, right? If we can get everybody in line, sitting in their desk at school when the bell rings, and then you grow up and you're in your office when 9 o'clock strikes, mm-hmm. and then you make your money, and then you go out and you spend your money, and you constantly are trying to buy what's lacking, then that's kind of the way that the system's set up. And I think all of this is swimming upstream. And I think the beautiful part is that we're seeing more and more people kind of taking that dive into the water, mm-hmm. and it's not quite as lonely. It's not quite as lonely to be swimming, because more and more people we're seeing do it, and we're even seeing companies and business leaders who are waking up to these facts and are engaged in a more compassionate form of business in which we realize that employees matter and that people's feelings matter and that customers' needs matter just as much as profits matter. And I think that for me, that's really inspiring. And people like Mark Benioff or my former boss and mentor Michael Rapino and Arianna Huffington, we're seeing these people who are Oprah Winfrey, who are open about the fact that compassion and caring for people is part of their business plan. And that makes it a lot easier on us, that we're not just kind of out there, the lone fish trying to swim up the stream,
Right. And when you had that moment in your book somewhere, you write how you were in this naked state, basically, where you no longer did have that identity that you could hide behind that so many of us do. And you walk along the beach and suddenly you look up and you see you're not alone because the dolphin had been following. Maybe you can describe that a little bit for the folks who haven't read your book.
Yeah, I was having one of those days that we have sometimes when we're on a spiritual journey, and when we've kind of looked the other way from a life that we had enjoyed. And in fact, I think this day was the anniversary or close to one of the anniversaries of my mom's passing. And I was, I'd really gotten myself into a place that I was feeling pretty sorry for myself. And I took a walk on the beach, and I was just kind of walking along, and all of a sudden, I don't know why, but I just kind of felt this calling to look up, and I looked out in the water, and there was this dolphin, which was my mom's favorite animal, mm-hmm. Beyond favorite, the kind of favorite that, my mom had dolphin calendars and dolphin magnets and dolphin stickers, and here's this dolphin just, right in pace with my stride. There's this dolphin gently swimming out in the water. And it was just, for me, I took it as a reminder that, sometimes we're alone, but sometimes we just have to look up, look around, and look in places we didn't expect to realize that we're not really alone. Right. That there are other people walking with us. There are, we're taught that compassion is finding ourselves in others, but sometimes we have to look at it from the opposite place too. When we're in a really bad space, it's not just about us being nice to others that we can find compassion, but we can give others a chance to be compassionate with us by allowing our pain to be not so insular and not so unique. And that day, as I was walking along the beach, there were probably millions of people who were feeling sad about the loss of a loved one. There were probably millions of people feeling a little bit lost in their lives or a little bit alone in their lives. And I think, we find compassion towards others, and then I think there's this opportunity for us to open our hearts and experience a bit of that oneness that you were discussing. Sometimes I think we jump too fast to oneness.
Right.
It's like can we just start before we get to we're all one? Can we just start with we're nice to each other? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think in this case also, can we start with my pain is not that unique. I can find a place of commonality with others by understanding that they're in pain as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I first read that, I thought, oh, that dolphin must have been your first meditation teacher, because
Yeah.
it said right here, I'm right here, and this is where life flows, right here in this moment, in the present moment. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got into meditation.
Yeah, I actually got into meditation. I had when I had kind of left work and I was starting a spiritual journey. I started out going to a Christian church, and that was fine. I found community, and I've always had trouble kind of fitting into any system or ideology. So I had trouble with some of what was being taught, but I had found kind of this emotional end around the things that didn't flow with me until it just didn't work. There were some positions around gay marriage and other issues that just didn't work for me. My mom, later in her life had married a woman, and that was a very moving experience for me to watch my mom's courage, literally as there were protesters outside of her wedding. And so,
Wow.
as some of these things started to happen, it didn't flow with me anymore. And so I was looking for a new kind of spirituality, and a friend recommended that I go and meet with a man who became like my father, and I don't even like to say who became my father and taught me just so much, and to this day teaches me so much. And his name is Guru Singh, and he was one of Yogi Bhajan's first students. And so I went to meet with him. And when I met him, it was one of those moments that I'm sure you've had, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have had, where you just know you're home. You just you look into somebody's eyes, especially a teacher, and you just know that you're supposed to be there. And that first day when I met him, he asked me what I had come to see him for, and I said I want to get to know myself and I want to get to know God. And he asked me to close my eyes, and we meditated that day. I don't remember how long it was for, but it felt like forever. You know how your first meditation just, just sat there and going, God, this is just, but that was the beginning. And I've meditated every day since then, and been blessed to have studied with some really great meditation teachers, after Guru Singh, and with Sharon Salzberg, and who's, with her loving kindness meditation has just so touched my heart. Mm-hmm. And Soni Rinpoche, and then just so many wonderful teachers who've given me a toolbox of meditation techniques to sit down and be on that journey of getting to know myself and getting to know kind of the greater we.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about breathing too a lot. Have you noticed how your breathing changed over the course of the striving part of your career to then going into the settling into meditation? Did you notice anything about your breath and how that changed over time as well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't breathe before. So I think the answer is I didn't breathe, and now I do. and I say that somewhat facetiously, but not really. I think that what I reflect back on my life, and when I talk to people who are still engaged in the day-to-day grind of that life, that there is a real distinction between the breathing that I do now and what the lack of breathing that happens because you're in fight or flight. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, we have to remember when we look at people who are desperately striving that their own self-worth and their love is tied up in that striving. And so how can you breathe?
Right.
When you're literally fighting for your life. And so I think definitely, yeah, there weren't a lot of deep breaths because you can't stop, and it's not safe. You know, it's not safe to send that message to your body that all is well.
Right.
When you believe that all is not well, right? That all is well only if I get this next deal done.
I think also, if you're feeling not good enough, as I think most of us feel at some time or another, that we also don't feel like we're good enough to take a deep breath almost.
Yeah. I think that's right, and I think we even find it in spirituality, you know. And I was in a meditation class the other day, and there was someone sitting next to me who was clearly struggling with their breathing, and some kind of congestion in their lungs or something. And I watched as they were like gutting through the meditation, and I thought, boy, that's just a little bit of the same kind of stuff, right? Where here we are in this environment of oneness, and yet we're not okay enough to cough or to get up and excuse ourselves to walk out, probably because we think if that happens, that people are going to think that we're not good enough, you know. And so I think this experience isn't limited to business. It's part of the Western experience. It's part of original sin, and it's part of, you know, my goodness comes out there. And so I think it's a daily journey, which is why we refer to meditation as practice, because every day we're practicing. And for me, I believe what we're practicing is loving ourselves and giving ourselves that permission to breathe and just to sit and be okay.
For those listening, did you have any other practices that helped you befriend yourself? Because it's a journey too, to go from not feeling deserving of love or until you do X, Y, Z to the point where you're okay and you're home and you feel at home with yourself and the world.
I'll tell you the moment that the concept that we're practicing self-love really clicked for me. I had gone to a retreat in Maui to see Ram Dass, and Sharon Salzberg was teaching there, and I didn't know who Sharon was, and so I sat down to the first meditation class with Sharon, and it was a guided meditation, and she said something that I had never heard before, but has now become, you know, my mantra over and over and over again. And she said, and during this meditation, you'll probably get lost. And when you realize and catch yourself spinning out, catch yourself lost in your thoughts, that moment is the whole point of this meditation. And she said, not because you caught yourself, but because you have an opportunity to begin a new relationship with yourself. And she said, and so you welcome yourself back with a gentle, I love you. Welcome back, I love you.
Oh, that's nice.
And I think I cried, you know, and if I didn't cry physically, my heart cried, because I thought that's the whole thing. Because up until then, there had been a part of me that was still kind of striving. I wanted to be a good meditator, you know. I had been a good businessman. Now I'm going to be the best meditator in the world.
Right.
And it wasn't, and part of it wasn't jiving for me. And when I heard her say that, it was, you know, everything clicked. And from that point forward, you know, my daily practice of yoga, nutrition, and meditation is all about 100% about loving my physical body, about loving my emotional body, about loving my spiritual body, and welcoming myself back again and again and again by telling myself that I'm loved. And sometimes that love comes in the form of words, and sometimes that love comes in the form of a green juice or a smoothie or a nice stretch. But all of these, for me, are ways that I'm reinforcing to myself that I matter, that it's okay to sit, that it's okay to breathe, and that I'm loved.
All right. Yeah, that's wonderful. So in terms of your relationships, how did that change as a result of the meditation? Maybe relationships with your family and your former work, or just the people around you.
Yeah. When I left my job, I was in the midst of my second divorce, and really shortly after I began to meditate, I met a wonderful woman at a conference. She was a speaker at a conference. Her name is Dr. Garner, and she's now my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell that story in the book of just the incredible love story and how beautiful my relationship with her is. And together the practice has become our joint practice, and we've invited our children to join in ways that are authentic and real for them. And so, our bedroom floor in the morning is this place where there's yoga and meditation and green smoothies going on, and kind of everybody's coming in and doing their part. My son comes and usually sits with us for the entire time. Our 13-year-old daughter, she'll pop in and out and meditate for a few minutes and do a little yoga and dance around the room. And kind of everybody shows up in a way that's authentic for them.
That's wonderful.
But it's really beautiful because the practice has become not just the practice of self-love, but the practice of family love.
Yeah. So in that sense, when you change yourself, it ripples out.
I think so, and I've learned with the kids, the key is to not make it one more thing they have to do, but more to kind of allow your life to be an example, and let the kids come along. My children have their own teachers. I haven't tried to be their teacher, and they often join us at retreats and have sat with us for 2 weeks in silence at retreats. But we really kind of allow them to have a relationship with the teachers and we're just kind of mom and dad.
Right.
And we're kind of all of us on this exploration of life together versus everyone must meditate for this long, because I never found that worked in any area of my life with my kids. It's like they're going to rebel. And so we've just said, hey, we don't want to be the people they're rebelling against. So let's all kind of join hands and march through life together. And it's been really, really beautiful and really a validation of what, conscious parenting can be, because the relationship is just so fulfilling.
Right. You mentioned in your book that they introduced different diet, more vegan and things like that. And so they were bringing compassion in the workplace. And what would you say to other leaders and just anybody who is in their jobs right now, imagining how would they relate to their job differently if they could have a different practice, a different way of being?
I think one of the first of all, that company is led by someone who lives with a high level of consciousness and is vegan and is really engaged in compassionate leadership. So I'd more say kind of what I would tell myself if I could go back in time, or what I do say to other business leaders who maybe are feeling some of the things that I was feeling in my job. I think for me, it always begins with a deep breath. I think if we can give ourselves permission to take that breath, mm-hmm. and often several of them, then we can meet at a place in the heart. And then the real message that I like to share is just, hey, you matter. Your feelings and your health matter as much as the health of the business. And when we can get in touch with that place where we matter, then we can go on that exploration of what's going on, and we can talk about the inner child, and we can talk about our need for love and how maybe we're pursuing love through business. But I think it has to start with some breath and with some slowing down and giving ourselves permission to take, because one of the reasons why we don't explore these things is because we have no space in our lives.
All right.
And the power of the breath, as you know, is that it creates space. Literally, it creates space, but in so many realms, it creates space for us to kind of begin this exploration. And so I think a deep breath and an I love you, and then let's kind of hold hands and walk through this journey together.
Yeah, that's great. And, another thing, since you're kind of an entrepreneur, I imagine some of my audience is as well. There's a way of thinking where people think that if they start meditating and taking pauses and breathing, that they might end up losing their edge, or, this is that culture of competition that thinks that if you're not always running, then you'll lose out, or you'll miss out, or you won't be at the top. What would you say to people thinking like that?
I have a lot of friends who say that to me, and it usually goes like, hey, I don't want to meditate because I'm worried I'm going to become a monk. And I always say to them, you are so far from being a monk. That like, we're not talking about you going off and joining an ashram or going to the monastery. We're just talking about taking a few breaths and 10 minutes of meditation a day. So I think sometimes we tend to be extremist in these areas.
Right.
And so, as you know, I mean, you can go as far as you want into meditation and into yoga and into nutrition, but you can also build just a nice little daily practice of, a few minutes of yoga in the morning and a few minutes of meditation and taking care of yourself through nutrition that can really fit in to a lifestyle. It's not that everybody needs to quit their jobs and run off to the mountains. I mean, the world would collapse, at least in the short term, if that were to happen. So I don't think ever our message can't be, hey, everyone needs to become a monk. It's just, can you embrace the part of you that is a monk and give it a little bit of love each day?
Yeah.
Don't jump to, it's like we don't go out and shoot basketball on the weekend and think, well, I might become LeBron James. You're not going to become LeBron James. You're just shooting around with your buddies, right? So if you sit down today on the cushion, you're not going to become the Dalai Lama. You're just going to be you sitting on the cushion, taking some time for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I also think that, in a sense, that if you can open your heart a little bit more by taking care of yourself, then the work that you produce will also benefit, and it'll benefit others. So in a sense, it really helps to take that pause.
I think that's just so right. And as entrepreneurs, we know so many of these kind of life laws already. It's like, if we, with our business, if we don't pay attention to the business, if we abuse the business, if we abuse the employees, we know it will fall apart. And so the same is true when we look back into our personal life. Some of these same questions that we ask to ascertain the health of our business, we just have to turn them around and ask them in our personal life. And when we find deficiencies, we can treat them the same way that as an entrepreneur we would treat it in business, and we can apply the same intelligence that we bring to our business, and we can bring it to ourselves. And what changes is the tactic. Where an employee meeting might be necessary at work, meditation might be necessary in our personal life, and where a review of the compensation plan might be necessary at work, a review of our diet might be necessary in our personal lives. But we possess these skills. It's just a matter of creating a little bit of space in our lives, and then taking that extra step of understanding that you matter. Just as much as the business, just as much as money, just as much as your bank account, your feelings matter too. Right. And then you take the skills you already possess, and you can build a life where you're both successful and fulfilled. And I think that's really what we're all looking for. Right.
And you mentioned the diet a couple times in your book. You make a really good point about, you talk about kind of intuitive eating, where you let your body kind of tell you what it feels better and healthier with. So you mentioned, like, for example, you cut down on some of the sugar and the I don't know what the other ingredient was, caffeine. And because a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about their monkey mind is so wild and everything, but just by cutting down on the sugar and the caffeine, that helps your body right there settle down a little bit more.
Yeah, it's really my teacher and friend Ron Teagarden, the great Chinese herbal teacher and master of Chinese herbs. He says that you're always in one of two cycles. You're either in a benevolent cycle, where you're treating yourself and your body with love, or you're in a vicious cycle. And that the beautiful part is that the way out of a vicious cycle is to simply take 3 benevolent steps towards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we are creatures of habit. And so all that happens is that we begin to eat certain foods, and the foods themselves, they're addictive, so they help that habit,
Right.
So, you start eating, refined sugars or drinking too much caffeine every day. And before long, your body's craving it, and it's just become a habit. So the way out of that habit is to take 3 steps in the direction that you want to go. And so you find replacements, whether it's a green juice or, perhaps you wean yourself off of caffeine with maybe green tea instead of coffee, or chai instead of coffee, or yerba mate instead of coffee. Instead of, with sugar, there's, so many great replacements now. And before long, you build a new habit for yourself. So there's a moment of pain,
Right.
but, I have a really kind of nutrient dense and compassionate diet, meaning, we try not to harm other beings with our diet, and we try to fill ourselves with as much nutrients as possible. But I don't feel like I'm missing anything because I've just built this habit, and I've allowed myself to let my taste buds feel good as well. So we don't have to martyr ourselves. I know friends who eat kale raw.
Oh, yeah.
That's a bit extreme, right? But I think we just build habits. And so when we find ourselves in a habit that isn't working for ourselves anymore, once again, it's like an entrepreneurial trait. When it doesn't work, you fix it. And so if it's not working for you anymore, your mind's racing, your health isn't good, your weight's not what you want it to be, you just replace it with a new habit. And we try to make our new habits steps in the direction of something that's benevolent, compassionate towards ourselves.
Right. And your body eventually kind of signals to you, hey, I like that. I like how you're treating me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, is that you can't hear that when your mind's racing on caffeine, right, or your system is racing on sugar. But as you know, there does come this point. I remember my first teacher in that area was David Wolf. And when he told me, listen to your body, I had no idea what he was talking about. He was like, listen, what's my body going to tell me? And now, a few years later, that really is kind of how I run my diet, is I just listen to my body. I trust what it's telling me, and then I feed it, something compassionate that fills that calling.
Yeah. In terms of your new journey, what can you say about where you're heading now in terms of, kind of reinventing yourself and finding your authentic voice?
Yeah, I'm really having a lot of fun being a student, and I'm having a lot of fun writing. And I think, right now that's really kind of what fulfills me is learning with teachers and learning with myself, and then kind of sharing how that shows up for me in my daily life. And so I wrote my book, And I Breathed, which was kind of the story up until a few years ago. And I've been writing a weekly essay about life and all these experiences that we're talking about at jasongarner.com. And I'm just kind of sitting down to start working on a second book. And intermixed in there are just beautiful interactions with great teachers and great friends and great people. And I'm just it's a bit of a kind of a Thoreau moment for me in my life, of just kind of going away for a little bit and recharging. And in Chinese medicine, we would call it, a yin. I'm in the middle of a yin cycle, where just kind of replenishing and spending some time loving myself and bringing in some new sources of wisdom. And then the yang part is sharing that with others.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. I really like your blog, what you're posting on your blog as well.
Thank you.
So people can find your blog by just going to jasongarner.com, and then I'll make sure to put a link to your book.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And your next book, when are you thinking that'll be?
I don't know.
It's still cooking.
The last book was so easy for me to write because it was a story that was, you'll understand, it was a story that wanted to tell itself.
Right.
And so I don't want to put pressure on myself of a date. I think this next story, it's been, I'm working on it, or it's working on me.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know exactly when, but it won't be too long.
That's great. Well, maybe just some final thoughts for, especially I think men. Is there anything you could tell them that you wish you had heard sooner?
Yeah, I just think it's okay to take care of ourselves. I think it's okay to admit you're scared sometimes, and maybe sometimes you have to admit that to yourself, and before you admit it to others. It's okay to admit that you need to be loved. And I think this idea that our feelings really matter, and who we are really matters, and that we're not. The job is great, and part of a life well lived is a creative expression that often comes through our jobs. Mm-hmm. But there's another side to us. There's another side, an internal side that has to be cared for just the same. And I think too many of us all know people who are working themselves to death.
Right.
And it's just so sad to see these great men, men who have accomplished so much in their lives, leaving this planet at 50 and 60. And so sad to see people whose only way out of kind of this treadmill is a heart attack, when we go and visit them at the hospital, or we go to these funerals, on a monthly basis and see our friends and great business leaders who are leaving. And so I think we have that, all of that is an invitation for us to look a little bit beyond the bravado, a little bit beyond the story of men are just warriors, and just to embrace the fact that we're both warriors and monks, and that we haven't been caring for the monk side very well. And so today is a day that we can start that, and that we really matter and we deserve that kind of care from ourselves.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's a great point to stop. And thank you so much for sharing all this.
Thank you. No, thanks for reaching out. And it was wonderful to connect with you. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jason Garner as much as I did. And you can find the episode and the show notes and the links to his book by going to meditationfreedom.com/031. And you can leave a question or a comment on the show notes. Those are very much appreciated, and it's always wonderful to actually hear from one of the listeners. So please don't hesitate to leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this episode or this show, feel free also to leave a comment on the iTunes or any of the other delivery vehicles for this podcast. And for those of you listening on a week-to-week basis, next week is not going to be a episode release because I'm on a training for my regular job. But you can still find me on Periscope once in a while, and Twitter, of course. And both Twitter and Periscope is ROODSICCO. So with that, that's all I've got for now. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and you check out the book that Jason has written. It's a wonderful book, meditationfreedom.com/031. And other than that, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Meditation Freedom Podcast, where meditation meets daily life.